here's a hacker conference, if you're aware. So there was a chief injection. I've been able to take hold of the controls here, so I'll be here with you till the end of the day. And the next topic is going to be tremendously great. Please raise your hands. Those of you, did you have any fails in your work? Not too many, not too many, not too many. Well, you may be all aware that those people that have achieved success did have some failures on their way. So we called such people up here. So Oleg from Positive Technologies, Dima from Tinkoff, and Vladislav from Yandex Dostavka, Yandex Delivery, and we will speak about their failures.
Друзья, и, пожалуйста, QR-код, ну, если...
Про бота для вопросов. Это самый удобный способ.
Yes, please use this chat bot for questions. It's the most convenient way of sending these questions. I will get it. You will see the QR codes.
Да, спасибо и всем привет еще раз.
Yes, thank you very much. This presentation is not just about our failures, it's on the contrary. People do recommend that's the way to use it, but nobody has ever said how to do it badly. So we decided to reverse it and started getting up with this idea of how not to do it. So we'll have this interactive format.
Sasha нас представила.
Sasha has just introduced us. I'm Oleg from Positive, Dima from Tinkoff, Vlad from Yandex. We have this background. We all started as developers. We were data engineers for a long time. Now we are heads of the teams of data engineering. We took the wrong path. So what we're going to talk about today? When we were preparing this, we collected a big pool of bad advice. We put them into clusters, and the clusters are as follows. We should not follow engineering practices. It's a dangerous thing. We just need to hit the nails with a microscope, and please do not work out how technologies work. We just copy them to Stack Overflow, and that's it. And we'll start with engineering practices. So you don't need Git. It's your enemy. Forget it. So what do you think, Dima? Well, I personally think that Git only gets in the way. Some branches, some repositories. What about before? You just put it on the FTP, and it works really well. And with the Airflow, when I started with the Airflow, we had that Google Composer. You put your files there, and you don't need Git. I remember working it all out without it, and my colleagues could edit something. It really worked well. Just tell me that it's not. And if we go back, we're all from data engineering. There is an entire part of people that worked with the SQL, and there was no Git. And it's not practiced there. So obviously, it seems like that should be like that. But I would like to argue. Okay, let's argue. That's why we have gathered here today. It's much more convenient without Git. But when we need to send this work to future generations, what we're going to do? Do you remember this story about the 3 envelopes? It's a long story to tell here. But globally speaking, when we speak about data engineering and the ETL development, Git plays the leading role here. But it will not work on its own until you will have the CI/CD process. The Git itself is a great tool to work with your code. It's good to take just a couple of days to learn to use it from scratch. I don't know how about the technical skills of people today, but Git as such is good. It's better to start with it than without it. You may develop SQL, which you will manually copy somewhere. It's best that you put it somewhere in Git. and slowly try to use all its options, go to trunk base and other esoterics. But I think if we start with this thesis, you just drop it gradually. You don't need to get a Git repository, that's for sure. Imagine that you've got a lot of analysts in your team, and they don't very much like Git, and they think that they don't need it, and they work in Pythons. I actually tackled that a number of times. First of all, we thought that any code is just a code, even if it's in the textbook. You just keep it in the Git repository. You shouldn't do that, because this JSON that could not be reviewed is a bad thing. There should be some intermediary state from the textbook to Git and vice versa. There should be a convenient pipeline, a convenient tool to commit it. What about Git and DBT? Git and DBT, like people say today, engineer, analysts. You learn Git and you will become engineer, analyst. I once had a story when I joined the team, and the team used BigQuery. So BigQuery is a story with a planned query. So they only had them in BigQuery, and we couldn't really find it.
Окей, давайте продолжать, собственно.
So let's continue.
Давайте я разгоню.
SQL procedures is an excellent way to transform the data. TSQL, you can even use Python for that. It seems like, why should we use something else when all of the logic can be kept right next to data? What do you think about that? Well, SQL procedure is a great thing, but how do we version it? With migrations. And do you think it's going to be convenient? Have you ever had such stories from the past? If only I had just stories from the past. I also have stories from the present day. In actual fact, when we speak about trying to make SQL procedures as migrations, we cannot track the changes. Each time new migration represents a new file, it's very painful to review. You can make such a tool anyway, but I'm currently in charge of data infrastructure in Tinkoff, and we've got green plan, dozens of clusters. It so historically happened that SQL transformations were in the SAS DI, and it was very inconvenient to write them, to call them. So the analysts would say, let's just wrap this in function and we'll just call it from SQL. Just send the parameters and run and launch SQL code, and what's inside doesn't really matter. So we thought, oh, great solution. You can send your code in any language, like Python in our case, which would be able to start normal ETL logic. But what's so bad about it? First of all, what about Python 2.7 limitation? Those who developed those functions didn't say thank you to us about those functions. When we started, of course, 2.7 was not bad, but not anymore. The second problem, Python does not exist in vacuum. You always need to have some kind of environment, and here we are in a great position. The ETL developer adds a new library to the requirements, and as the SQL procedures are running on the nodes on Greenplan, we just need to roll out all these requirements. It's good that there are no conflicts, but if you go back to dozens of clusters, each of them has 144 segments. So imagine how many do we need to provision a huge number just to simply install it. So you grow a potential inconsistency. So it's very, very hard to provision thousands of servers to make sure that everything works well. Apart from that, you need to have some kind of the tester contours. Anyway, I think SQL procedures are possible, but with the single nodes, if you can version them, I think it's not a useful thing to do.
Слушайте Диму.
Раздолбать все.
SQL procedures are a great thing to destroy everything. You don't need tests. You don't need linters to write.
Линтер ты последний раз
What kind of linter did you use last time?
Представь, data pipeline оттестировать.
You may imagine to test pipeline.
С тем, зачем нам нужны тесты.
So, why do we need tests anyway? Why do we need linters? If you have a team made up of a couple of data engineers, you cannot write tests.
Большую команду, у которой есть некоторые
If we speak about the big team
контракты с аналитиками,
with contracts with the businesses,
когда ваши
with SLAs when your data.
На мой взгляд, без тестов вы не обойдетесь, потому что вы тупо не сможете сделать.
Well, you cannot do without the tests because you won't be able to release, and inside the release.
Это первая часть.
Without the release, it would be very difficult for you to cope with it. The second part.
Где-то в конце разработки думаем о том, что
as data engineers, in the end of the development cycle, we think that our ETL creates data and it can be high quality data, bad quality data. In SQL and Spark,
выбранном вами движке,
in any engine you choose, any processing method, it should have tests to control the data quality. And it's important. Guys, what do you think about those lists of unformatted SQL? That's a bad story. If a new developer, data engineer comes in to your team, joins your team, they come back to the previous part. They open up a set of procedures and try to find out what is happening. And it's very painful. I think this person won't be able to withstand his trial period in the company. And if we add a little bit of linter, it will be a little bit more pleasant for him or her, because the code will become a little bit more structured to what he is or she is used to. What about tabs and spaces? Tabs or spaces? I vote for tab. We'll talk to you later. We'll talk to you later. We'll talk to you seriously. Dry kiss, Yagni, grasp, just a set of letters. But you get such questions in a job interview. Sometimes not directly. Just like everybody would like to climb up Mount Everest. You go there and they ask you about JSON. People prepare for job interviews and they read books and they try to explain what they've read without understanding. But data engineering and software engineering are principles. The key things here are engineering principles, and all of the practices have been worked with the software engineers, and it was painful work. So it's all about make it simpler. Don't over-engineer. Do you need it in Yandex? No, we don't need it. Don't you think it's done just to complicate your life, to make your life harder? I mean, coming up with different concepts and things, different types of approach to development. It's all about making it all complicated. What do you think? I actually wanted to sound provocative. You know, have you tried to write the same CTE a few times? Please raise your hands. But why does an SQL person need CTE? This whole CTE mechanism is actually getting rid of repeats, because you repeat the piece and you put it in CTE. Go and take DBT, because the pieces that repeat would be established in separate models and macros, and you will stop repeating. Seems like that they all were created in DBT architecture.
хранилищ, да, то есть
The same thing applies when we talk about the build of storage.
коснемся историй.
We'll touch upon other stories. You can build storage on Python, but you can take DBT normally or just simple SQL.
Здесь оно есть. Я, честно, не знаю все эти буквы.
I honestly don't know what these letters stand for. But what about
Вот ты говоришь спрятать...
explicitly better than implicitly? What do you think about that?
Мы говорим...
And DBT for that matter. Don't repeat yourself. That's what we say. We hide it in DBT, and then all of a sudden we come up with this new principle. Explicitly is better than implicitly. We know what it sounds like. It contradicts one another, doesn't it? What do you think? Where's the edge? I think there's no contradiction. It's not the implicit that you were looking for. We did not include that advice here. I think here in the DBT model, you will obviously show that there will be something used, but for this you need to understand what DBT stands for and what it means. I think practic dry and DBT can be provoked with the following statement. Anti-practice of DBT is to make up with a great extension model and put a lot of nullable parameters in there. True story. That's a piece of bad advice. That's bad advice. So using your microscope to hit the nails. The microscope is heavy, and you hit the nails and you can kick the nails. Airflow. I mean, here, what do you overuse? I mean, Airflow is an excellent ETL tool. What do you think about this provocative statement? What's ETL tool? ETL tool is when we have a process of extraction, processing, upload, and this whole process is orchestrated by this and making it convenient. That's the ETL tool. Okay, let's put it this way. Airflow has Python. Python has a very rich ecosystem of working with data. If we take pandas, for example, and in tasks, you can combine it in DUGs beautifully, and you can code generate the DUGs. We go to API, we transform it in pandas, we put it up there. We went to the API when we built the DUG bag. Airflow, as I imagine it, is an excellent tool in terms of orchestration, very convenient with a very convenient user interface, with small size teams to launch something and try something out. When we speak about production grade clusters, Airflow starts playing tricks on you, pulling tricks on you. Oleg mentioned the first one. People stop thinking about how they package overflow inside their DUGs and pipelines and do it in pandas, and then all of a sudden all this thing crushes everything. You just need to check schedulers and works, and it's very inconvenient. But when you use Airflow like it's intended to use, when you use it as an orchestration tool, which runs a very delicate code with the decorators covering some issues, with this you can make a very good ETL. Before I went to Yandex Delivery, I worked for X5, and in X5 group, retail group, we used Airflow with Spark. To make a good ETL tool from Airflow, you need to have DBT, another three-letter acronym. We add DBT to ETL, and now there you go. A good ETL tool comes out of it. For me, the main conclusion is that Airflow is not an excellent ETL instrument. Airflow is a good orchestrator where you can come up with different DBT solutions. Then yes, it's a good one. And the thing that we discussed previously in the previous session, then it works. Let's prohibit and ban lip sync, and Dima will speak about why on the sideline. You should not use SQL. Everything can be done with Python. We touched upon that statement, which we've just read on the screen, and the previous presentation was about that, and this whole life of ours is all about Python, Python, and Python. So what do you think about that, guys?
Ураган и ветер.
It's just like a tempest and thunderstorm and wind, gale force wind. Why not make everything on Python? Because we have polars. Seems like everything works well, but where are we going to stumble upon? I work a lot with analysts. On Python, you do everything. You work with visualization, data preparation, you work with emails, with dozens and dozens and zillions of content. Why do we need that? You have a beautiful business layer, a detailed one. So before shopping window, you need to come up with this solution. And you have two options: to use Python, you upload it to Polars, you transform it, or simply come up with the SQL script. What would you choose? When I think about it, well, lately I spoke to a vice president in the company why we're all focused on SQL. So I think it's time for us to drop this focus on SQL and do something else. So I started getting irritated. 250 people use SQL. Why should we dissolve it with Python? The biggest value of SQL, and I think that was mentioned by Bron and Vladimir, relational databases are as old as 50 years, and there was an anniversary. You have 50 years of that solution with SQL added on top of that. If you're going to use something more promoted, it's going to be smarter than you are. I spoke to a colleague of mine who spoke about data frame map of Spark, and it's better than SQL. Do you think what's the value? There is an optimizer there, and in Python there is no optimizer in the base case scenario. And thinking that you are smarter than the optimizer, you can try and use the brick house. So who is going to survive? You can do it on Python. Absolutely, we need to come up with cyclic transformations, and you will not teach the neural networks to work with SQL. However, there was one person who did that. Some exceptions are possible, but still, it's just small data, and for small data, SQL will still be ruling there before some kind of new SQL will be invented. What about Smart SQL? SQL expands since 1992. There's been a lot of time. Even nested data can be used for that. You can use SQL just for streaming purposes. Do you use it for streaming? Yes, we do. You can change SQL incrementally. It's very convenient. Wrapping it up, I should say that Python is needed. It's powerful. It's good. SQL is great, but you need Git, GBT, and Airflow. So we are passing the floor to you. ClickHouse does not freeze. It sounds like a meme. Have you ever seen, freezing ClickHouse, sluggish one? I've seen it. What did you do with it? My team misused it. Why? Let me tell you. We were discussing this on the sideline. We discussed system design, so I'll go into that direction. System design and how to design the architecture. It's a very important thing in the data engineering world, because the architecture, the OTPL basis, it has data lake solutions. So the ClickHouse is the thing
которое позволяет вам выжить.
that allows you to survive and it allows you to squeeze out much of the analytical scenarios when you would like to select
Для вывода, не знаю, в BI какой-то
any BI output,
любой другой
to
UI-сервис.
have a BI output or any other UI service. ClickHouse is great for that. When you think that ClickHouse is great, it's a fast solution, and you would like to make an LTP base, you will understand what pain is all about. So you'd better use ClickHouse in proper places. So I'm finishing already. In my team, we use it exceptionally for
То есть все объекты, которые
all of the objects, all of the items that go to the reports,
они приземляются в ClickHouse. Это позволяет
they land in ClickHouse, and it's a very nice response rate that we get. What do you think about Kafka Engine? Kafka Engine is a great solution. Let me explain when it stops being great. It's a good solution when you
случайно согласились от заказчика, я хочу
somehow agreed to get real-time metrics. You don't need to think about it a long time. If you have a microservice architecture in your company, if you have microservices that exchange data through topics, you get the aggregate topic where information is uploaded, and you can use overhead, and in ClickHouse you can tune in the view and connect to Kafka, and you will work it in real time. But at a certain moment in time, it's somehow related to the previous statements. When SQL procedures, Python, DBT, when the project out of 2 metrics turns into 300 metrics, that's a real case, my scenario. We decided to use Flink because this connection between ClickHouse and Kafka Engine and topics started disassembling. Let me tell you my story. One company where I was employed, they had a single node, we used Kafka, so we did everything on the fly. And one day, a part of the data did not arrive, just 50% out of 100. So we started figuring it out, and it seems like the second node of the ClickHouse was installed. We had a merge 3 engine, so part of the partitions went to one node, the second half to the other node. So when I asked the guys why, they said, it's replication, guys, high availability. So,
ну, наверное, добавлю еще, что по поводу
what else can I say?
ClickHouse важно
about architecture. ClickHouse is the thing that you tune up properly, use appropriate engines, and it's important that you keep tracking ClickHouse, monitor it, because if you use it simply as a box, as a simple fast box solution, trust me, this box will soon turn into brick, and when it turns to brick, it will stop freezing. Transactional load on an analytical database. Vladimir said that you can do that. Green plan record, a couple of inserts are possible. What about updates? And it works with deletes quite well. I remember deleting it in a big table. And you were the loader from Roscontainer. I think this advice is very dangerous for all of the companies. Absolutely. You just need to go back to system design. Please select your tool for what you need. Whatever the vendor says, think about it. As a person who exploits RINTAP, never do that. I say never do that. But previously I had an experience with Vertica, an excellent one, and we said to the people, please do not put transactional load over the analytical database, and people said, do not make small inserts, don't make joins, and they remembered that. So what did they do instead? A coordinator crashes on analyzing their queries. Enclose was 500 kilobytes, so they put it in the query. There is no insert, there is no insert at all, but it didn't work. And then they come up and they say it's not working. That their entire sorter stopped just because of that. Okay, let's continue. Don't work out how technology works. ChatGPT and Stack Overflow will help you with that. It's more than enough. Simple text formats are the things that big data need. Keep data in CSV and JSON. And that's the best thing. Well, if you zip them, it will become better. It's a real convenient solution. You just go to the file and check it with the head. Greenplum cannot upload it in a different way. So do you think the fools made that decision? Maybe. You sound provocative. So let's go back to the question. Green plum. Well, it's sour. It's bad. It's absolutely disgusting. Well, Braun showed that there was even worse BBF, and we didn't really know what to do with that. And XLSX, it's semi-binary. It's a zipped XML, but still. What could there be? Could there be any problems if you choose a proper divider, if you choose the right quota 10 times? How many combinations can you count? What can you select? Divider, quoting, end of lines? So how many combinations did you have in your projects? Remember that one? So I remember there was a person who was sitting there 3 times a week selecting different sets of data with all of the possible esoteric combinations. But what about JSON? It works a little bit better. Yes, that's true, especially when all of a sudden a schema is changing. And it looks real beautiful, but you know, I'm not talking about redundancy. Well, the schema has changed, so what? It's just another if that you add there, that's it. The change of schema, schemaless format is not too bad. You just have this column disappear and that's it. Or you added the new one, you didn't read it. So what's so bad? What if the type has changed? Well, if the type has changed, then it gets much more interesting, especially if you have some parsers that very scrupulously treat that. I also had a case like that. A JSON from one petition stopped arriving to Kafka because the colleagues decided to re-upload the data and started being put in parentheses, or in quotation marks rather.
Ну, хотя бы Avro.
What about other things? So I think Avro at least, but you need to keep schema somewhere. You may keep the schema and store it in the folder. What about Parquet? Well, Parquet is my love. I agree. Well, what else do we have? We have ORC, Carbon. Vladimir spoke about Elance, which is a new format. And Nimble from Facebook. Has anyone tried to look inside Parquet when debugging it? How did you do it? I took utilities and the Python tools, and you can do the debugging quite well. I was watching Oleg's presentation, so he spoke about that. Do you repeat that? Well, I would like to wrap it up here. Text formats have lots of problems, but you will face them on the edge of the older systems, so be prepared for that. And so that you need to have tools to take a look inside your binary format, because that's what often happens. And it's true, it's fact. So let me read this. Partitioning, distribution, and sorting of the data in tables, it's none of your business. Let data engineers do that. But we speak for data engineers, so let other data engineers do that. Imagine that's not me. I only just read what's on the slide.
Это же реально не...
Okay.
Зачем об этом думать?
You think it's the real thing. Why you need to think about it? You put it there. You have too many presentations about great services created by interesting, clever teams. I think they thought about that. You spoke that the databases are very nice, clever optimizers. They do not work slowly. So imagine that I have the 500 rows of the table. What's gonna go wrong in this case? So what's gonna go wrong? What can go wrong? If we go back to system design, seems like that the data will not spread on its own, even if you wanted to. Why? Well, some people say we are not supposed to meet your expectations, right? You know, DBs become much more intelligent, so I think this problem with petitioning and distribution may be resolved on its own. And if you have some kind of a load pattern, you can rearrange it in an automatic fashion, but you are unlikely to know it in the first place. And unfortunately, we still live... We do not live in a perfect world. That's why. And honestly speaking, I should say that being an educated gentleman, I learned about petition pruning and collocation joins. So I thought that that's the best way of putting it down, of distributing. Because I wrote more than I read. Many times I saw the situation that it slows down, the performance goes down, just because people forgot to write, wear clothes on petition. So those who used the big query, remember there was this tick where you can restrict the calls for petition call, so that you could never write a query in the interface. But then the colleagues find out that they can do that, and it starts working much faster. As far as distribution goes, you may assume how it can be used, but God knows how your colleagues would like to join it. Verti does help here. In Greenplum, it's a little bit more complicated, but you just need to take a look at distribution. I think you'd better make a selection and create a new distributed table in different ways so that your query works. It works, and first and foremost, people who start should be told, take a look at data catalog and DDL, what you join it with. Take a look at inquiries and come up with ideas. What about sorting? I understand about petitioning and distribution. What about sorting? Sorting out is much more difficult. First of all, not all of the DBs give us increase in performance. I only know two things where proper sorting may really shine. It's verticus with projections, and it's the properly put parquets. I go back to Bronze and Vladimir's presentations. Parquet is a smart thing. If you sort it out, you won't have to read out something extra. You may think about it, but it's a more advanced topic for those who write. Here we try to think more, and we would like to attach this story to Iceberg, which is about rearranging data for faster computing, because it's not always possible to do in the order that you are accustomed to. Well, in the end, I would like to say that there are projects that somehow automate maintenance of the table formats, try to optimize the load and automate it, but it works differently. It depends. And this is the most dangerous advice to those who work with Spark. Use two pandas in Spark. This is really very dangerous, but it's very convenient. But what we're supposed to do if not two pandas? If all of a sudden, well, it sounds strange that we have this thread of data engineering. It's more about those people who call themselves ML engineers, data scientists. It's a very dangerous thing because with one simple thing you destroy everything good, which was established by Apache Spark. That's in that point where you destroy all its advantages. Well, at least the best optimizer is Catalyst, and second of all, it's the distributed kernel, distributed computing, and you kill it all. Well, if we have two pandas and then transformation, why do we need Spark at all? So we are not supposed to use two pandas to Spark. Why do we have to use two pandas apart from those EML models? But you may Google it. UDF, for instance. There are different options of how you can write UDFs, where you can pack all the variations which are related to ML. So that's the first part. The second part, there are methods where you can pull out the information and then show a certain number of strings and lines, and then you use API data frame, and it will use the worker. What I saw is that people start working properly with big data. There is the result. You put it in Vertica. So it seems like that we all know how to do that, but you do it to pandas and then to SQL. It works. You don't need to add any DDL. It will be very good and everybody will enjoy it. In actual fact, this is the real case. I've seen it many times. The question is what we're supposed to do it. You need to study what you use. If you start using Spark, if you're a data engineer, well, I don't really believe that data engineers, if they are learning the query plans, if they take a look at UI, ever think about using two pandas and not think about removing it from there, because this advice is real bad. Know what you use. Spark has great documentation that explains how Catalyst works, how Spark works architecturally, why we have distributed calculations there. If you dedicate a week or two reading it, then all of the shuffles and all of the optimizations in Spark become more or less clear to you. When you use this, you are either a strange data engineer or you are an analyst who has gone too far to the code. The analyst who uses Spark, must they understand how it works? Yes. I remember discussing this at Smart Data last year. I think analysts are great guys and they are capable of getting deep into the engineering culture, and I do it successfully in the second company in the row. If you explain what they need to do and what it gives them, they implement the engineering culture quite well. And don't use two pandas. For example, an X5 retail group, there were lots of analysts. They used PySpark, and I saw no problems. If there were problems, they were more about resources, Spark sessions, with how to assemble that. But in terms of data processing and preparation, there were no questions at all. The main advice to them was when you end the process and you need to prepare the data to do something with them, split this in two phases. You'll prepare an object, like you will send it to HDFS, and then you'll work either with Hive or with Python, but you'll work with this object, which will be ready for you. As a platform data engineer, to avoid that, you need to have a convenient tool which will allow you to upload the result of your work efficiently and effectively, so that people don't think about encapsulation. Give this tool to them so that your users don't try to do that. Exactly. So if you're a data engineer, if you have an active stance in your life, it's the thing that you need to do. You need to be an engineer, you need to be a kind engineer. I think Spark, they say Spark is an excellent tool for data integration. Who's ever integrated it with Spark? Please raise your hands. Great, great. People lived in the same age like I did. Well, Spark has connectors with two sides. So what's bad about it? There's nothing bad about it. I think that it's not the proper tool to use it. When you collide the distributed word of computing with the non-distributed one, I saw a framework for ATL which declares, which turns declarative configs to PySpark. What's wrong with that? And I saw Scoop. Why? Well, it seemed like that the Scoop was in production for an entire generation of data engineers. How come you cannot write the same thing on Spark? It will work perfectly, but one thing. But one thing, so that it will be uploaded to the memory, it will overuse the memory of yours just for trivial tasks. So what do we replace it for? When and why? What for? You need to have connectors, you need to upload it somehow. But you just do everything in Spark and then you upload. There's nothing wrong about it. So I think the data should be ingested first, and then you do something with the ingested data. Of course, Spark can upload the data to the target system, but you'd better not do that if you don't have an efficient driver. I swear, I remember writing a similar thing to Spark. In Python, it was one of the first platform solutions, and I remember launching the book table, and it would immediately crash. But I figured it out. I generated that on Spark. I did the ranges, and then I would put it on partitions. They would launch a session, and then I would upload. But you shouldn't repeat it after me either. And everything was based upon the Scala. So I believe my colleagues will forgive me for that. Is your tool still used? I hope not. I think they made up a nice user interface to what he had invented, and they still use it. Dima, what's your favorite one? Many sensors in Airflow. It's great, it's great. It's a good tool. It becomes better year by year. They are delayed. There are many types of them. They are not so impactful on the DB. I have a very heavy Scala background in my life, so I've seen things. So let's imagine the parameters the sensor and the Airflow has. Does anyone remember? Everybody does. I remember 3 of them, and one of them being duck ID. So you and your friends and your colleagues, rather, your colleagues integrate data, you use that, and probably they had misspelled something in duck ID, and then they corrected that in some other release, and your sensor didn't work it out, because the sensor is a powerful tool and it becomes better, but you will never know what is connected to what. Maybe they're making this tool these days, but for this you'll have to have some statistical analysis. First of all, if you're ready to be completely unaware who is connected to your processes, that's right, go for it. use sensors.
Второй момент, который меня всегда
Number
смущал, я
two,
не знаю, пофиксили или нет,
it's
что вы
always
сказали,
been
execution time,
bad
как
for me.
бы,
You always need to show the execution time of a dog, but you never know when it completes. You have a hope that it will
100%
complete
обходится,
this day,
но
or maybe
мне
not.
кажется, что это как-то
You
контринтуитивно,
can
что
bypass
я
this, but
хочу
I
в это
think
время
it's
узнать,
counterintuitive.
что мой даг уже
Here, I would
выполнен,
like
и
to
это
find
получается,
out
нужно
that
узнать,
my
что он
dog
выполнился
has
какой-то
already
период.
been
Ну, вроде бы
resolved
да,
for a
вроде бы
period
нет,
of time.
вот,
Maybe
что
yes,
прошло. У вас какие-то
maybe
были кейсы,
it's just a piece of junk.
вы мимо прошли?
So what do you think? Have you ever
Я
had similar
предпочитаю
things?
Дакстер.
I think I prefer Dexter.
Но у меня много разных кейсов было, сэр.
Well, I have many cases with airflow. I used it in 2 companies. This is a bad advice because there's no solution integrity and the understanding who signed your objects, especially when you start getting a lot of objects there. It is a very good bad advice somehow. In the older versions, there was this slot where you would have to expand the slots in the config, and the launch of the sensor would use the slot.
Полезные нагрузки,
And,
просто гоняешь свои сенсоры.
instead of the payload, you just work with the
Нет,
sensors.
сегодня
Are we
для
done?
Дима,
We are done. Yes, we are
Влад и Олег.
done. Thank you very much. Dima, Vlad, and
Спасибо.
Oleg have been with you. Thank you very much.
Давайте разгоним еще что-нибудь.
Да, мы готовы на живую.
And by the way, we are ready
Давайте для
to
разогрева, ребят.
take a couple of questions. Please use the QR code. We will
Для разогрева пару вопросиков от меня.
send a couple of questions here just for you to warm up.
Какой ваш личный топ вот этих вредных советов, которые
What's your personal top
может быть,
of
у,
bad advice
начинающих
that we
специалистов
see
или в компаниях?
from the beginners in the company?
Ну, это
For me, it's 2 pandas.
вредный совет.
That's a very
Я
bad
часто встречал,
advice.
то, что приходилось приучивать к гиту,
When there was something,
в том числе аналитиков.
when we have to attach something to Git,
Я не очень понимаю.
Ну, скажем, инженеры разные бывают.
the engineers may be different.
меня
That's right.
Код, no-код, ETL.
Ну, их можно
Like
не нанимать.
low code, no code ETL. So you should not hire them. Sometimes we have them as legacy.
У меня
Git
были инженеры,
hits
которые
straight in the heart. We have
конфликты
the engineers sometimes which would resolve the conflicts and the ETL developers, and it was their duty. I'm sorry, guys.
А какие, может быть, ресурсы,
Are
доклады?
there any resources, presentations, trainings are a must-have to avoid those mistakes that you talked about? I personally think that for data engineers, it's important to have a developer's background, a computer science background, which will give all these skills of the basic engineering practices, which will help them a lot in the future. Those guys who have been through Yandex Practicum, will they pass the audition with you? Will they pass the job interview? Of course, of course. I'd agree with Oleg. The years of software engineering development has given us a lot of programming patterns that are criticized, but it's best that you start with them and then you just go as low as data engineering. I'd vote for that. As far as background of computer science, it's best that you teach study it in a university. But if not, just read the books.
И, собственно, в голове, когда у вас все это структурируется,
Read the basics, and when you have it all structured in your head, then the architectural solutions, the system design, then it will become quite obvious why it works like this.
Учили только
In our university, Git was studied only for MA. What kind of university was that?
Не случилось.
Let me not tell you,
Ладно.
because we wouldn't want to have any product placement here.
Эти
Anyway,
паттерны есть, и их
You
используют.
guys, are there these patterns used?
Примеры,
But
когда вот
are there any
большинство
examples
вот
in
этих
your
red
practice
флагов
that
было,
most of these red flags were there, but the project really
Знаешь,
worked?
как это бывает? Редфлаги случаются.
You know how it happens, red flags do occur and the project works, but at what cost?
Бессонные ночи, выгоревшая
Who
команда.
is the cost of that? Sleepless nights, restless nights,
инвестиции, то есть
the burnt out team, etc. It's just a question of investment and time, not just the time, but it's the question of the people who suffer
она уедет в какой-то там релиз
from being
безусловный. Ну и потом,
too
если
heavily loaded,
пойдут скачут.
and then they are likely to leave that job. Well, of course, if we launch this, it's okay. It's okay, but then we'll have to follow it up. Then we'll have people joining the team. We need to onboard the people, etc. Before I joined the big company, I didn't see such things.
Вот, кстати, интересно, да, вот
By the way, it's interesting.
что делать,
What are we supposed to do if you changed your work, change your job, you join the team, and you see the full list of these things from this presentation? What do you start from?
Ну, зависит.
You need to show this presentation to the manager. It depends on your manager, it depends on your boss. Are we talking about data engineers? Right. You go to the lead.
И тут можно активно.
I initially thought about the manager, but here you may think about a week or two and think about the strategy of how you move from this to something better. But if the lead engineer didn't cope with it on his own, on her own, I don't know. Hell knows what to do.
быстро растущий стартап.
It's the fastest. It's a fast. What if it's a fast-growing startup? Exactly. I had some experience. I remember in e-chemist in e-aptica company. I saw people coming up with some solutions, and people help you design it the proper way, regardless. I think you should be concerned and caring.
Мы уже знаем.
This will save us from failure. We know already 3 wise people. Are there any questions from the floor? Can I get the list? Can I get the list of wise people?
Справа от тебя.
You need to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Версионирование скриптов в базе, я слышу.
DBT бери, версионируй.
А какой вопрос?
Go ahead, take DBT. What was the question?
История и современная практика версионирования скриптов в базе данных. Такой вопрос.
Modern practices of making versions in databases.
А дайте
No. Let's just define what the question was. We need that microphone working.
О, ура.
Finally.
В молодости я использовал программу, называется Flyway.
When I was young, I used Flyway.
Да, но
Maybe you heard about that.
инкрементальная миграция.
It's incremental migration, a typical case scenario, a typical case.
К чему это все в итоге привело?
What about others using similar things? What did it lead to? May I? Yes. First of all, when I join a team and I start something, I say we need to have a migration system.
Я рассказываю, что
And second of all, I just tell that down migrations are not needed. We may discuss it on the sideline, but I think we don't need them.
неплохо, когда мы
And it's good. It's good when we evolutionize DDL, when we try to evolutionize
аналоги процедур, будь то
some analogs of procedures like mat views in QuickHouse
нам очень
and the procedures stored.
возможность side-by-side посмотреть
We
изменения
need to take a comparison side by side. The incremental migration
целиком.
doesn't help us do that. You write the code completely. But if we eradicate that problem, why not?
Не лучший паттерн, да.
However, it's not the best pattern of doing it on base. No. Let me put it differently.
Окей.
You can do it on base, it's okay, but it's not the best pattern.
Процедуры на современных БД, да, ну то есть
To have
просто на секундочку.
procedures on the contemporary databases.
Ядро было написано.
I remember working in a company where they have this kernel with the SQL, and it was all rolled on the procedures, and
Хранимая процедура все еще
the procedure
запросом, и она
was
компилируется
still
по
a
статистике, в которой
query, and it compiles with the statistics when you roll it on.
что вам делать?
When
Вам
statistics
придется
changes,
вашу
what are you
хранимую
supposed to do? You need to recompile it.
Так сказать, red flag, почему так делать?
And that's a major red flag. That's what you're not supposed to do. You just need to add something on Flyway, and it will be able to help you do that. Thank you very much, Dima, Vlad, Oleg.
Прекрасный
Thank you very much for this wonderful